Hey, it's Anthony and Tucker with Land Title. We came to bring you your market update today. This is our full year in economic update, so hang in there. We're going to go national projections, what's happening in the economy, and we're really going to set the stage for what you should expect in 2025.
We'll definitely be talking about rates a bit, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let's start talking about it now.
Well, how about just debt and GDP and really what's going on? So this slide right here tells you kind of the size of the economy, also the debt. So GDP in red here tells you that our national, size of the economy is $29 trillion. We're sitting at 35.5 trillion in debt, and that deficit is getting larger based on the economy at a faster rate. So we've been spending more than we make. Essentially, it's very simple, right? What happens when you do that? You take on more debt, and then you service your debt, and then you have to raise taxes to service your debt, and then you're in a downward spiral, right? Like a lot of countries. This is where we're starting to get to maybe concerning rates, I think.
I think so too. And normally, kind of there's a general rule of thumb out there about 120% of GDP versus debt. So when your debt's 120%, so 20% more than your GDP, that's when your cost to keep paying off your current interest and your new spending of having to borrow so much really starts to gain velocity and really starts eating into the actual economy. And we're actually feeling that now, and that's part of the reason our bond market has been a little bit out of whack and why our rates have been higher. So it's all going to tie back to us in real estate. But then when we're looking at this graph and we see that spread, you can really see on the top graph the historical trend of, our red is GDP, and then our left is debt. And then our lower graph is just over a shorter time period since 2015. So you can really kind of see it in a smaller scale more recently. And you can really tell here on that top graph just how much our debt has grown over the last 4 years, 5 years since COVID. You can see that giant jump in blue spending and how it's just continued to skyrocket up. Well, that's causing a lot of the issues right now in the debt market or the bond markets is because U.S. government debt is going, that's not as attractive as it used to be. Their chances of repaying it are getting lower and lower the more we borrow from how they view it in the markets and the risks side. So that's going to be continuing.
I mean, that's
what it is. But that's how they view it, is the risk.
Yep, it's a risk analysis. So let's dive into the next one. This is the 10-year Treasury bill, right? Tucker's already kind of jumping into this a little bit. But in all reality, you can see the cost of treasuries and what they've been worth. Sorry about our green screen here, everybody. But you can really see basically historically what debt cost and where it's been. Now, we're really at a pretty average rate for like the last 40 years or so. So when you look at where it is, this is directly tied to interest rates, which is why we show it. So everybody's kind of talking about this and everyone wants to see it to go down. I just don't have 100% confidence that that's even an option right now. And it doesn't really look like it's going up yet either, but it's like a coin toss from everyone keeps talking about. So we can make decisions based off what we know today. This is not like we're here with your crystal ball to tell you interest rates are going to hit some rate later because they're just not. We don't know.
We don't know. But the one thing I would like to say is, Anthony, go back to that for a second, is remember who you're talking to. We're both 36. I just turned 36, so my mistake, I know. 36, 37. We've only known cheap money in our lives. So keep that in mind when you're working with folks in different demographics. Hey, folks who are in their later years, they've gone through high interest rate cycles before. Us in our professional lives, we've never had anything outside of cheap money since college in 2006, 2007. It's only been very, very, very low rates.
Yep.
And that's what we're used to. So just remember that when you're working with folks out there, where are they coming from? What's their knowledge and what's their background?
Yeah, all right. So what about this one, the 10-year versus the 2 years? So this is a good indicator of recessions. Usually. Why are we not going into a recession right now, Tucker?
Well, that's a really good question. Because normally when we see that 10-year get less than a 2-year, right? Hey, the longer term the debt is, the higher the rate, right? Longer term, longer risk. So when the 2-year is more expensive than the 10-year, that normally means, we're about to have a recession. That's what the economists think. That's what the markets are acting. We didn't have that. And that really means
we've been in it for a while. So it's not that we're out of the
We're not out of the weeds.
We're not out of the weeds yet. But in all reality, look at the history. History tends to repeat itself. But then here we are where the Fed's making decisions differently than they used to.
Yes. And so that's where the labor market is a little bit different. Historically, as we see these other gray lines on the lower graph, right, all the big gray bars are recessions. We can see how recessions, normally follow an inversion. Well, we haven't had one yet this time. And that's because Jerome Powell, who's the Fed chair currently, has taken a much different approach than his predecessors And that's where his predecessor said, only thing that matters is inflation.
Right. 2% is our target. That's it. That's all we care about.
We don't care the fallout of the pain and suffering on the worker and the employment rate. All we care about is the inflation rate. This Fed has been much different of balancing jobs as much as inflation. So they're really kind of working those in tandem, which is causing us to get to this, quote unquote, I think we heard this a lot the last few years, soft landing.
Right.
And it appears that we are doing so currently. So it appears like we're getting into that track. Now, a lot of uncertainty in policy coming up. So, nothing we can control there.
Right. Hang in there. One of the good things that we have been seeing, though, is personal savings rates are back down to more normalized levels. This is a good function of there's not too much money in the economy. We're not starving everybody, right? Because labor rates are probably in a good spot. But you can see we're kind of floating around that, 5%-ish, 4.4%. These are good rates for Americans, right? A lot of countries operate at 10% personal savings rates. We like to spend money in America. It kind of is what it is.
America loves debt.
Right. All right. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So our M2 is our money supply. And that's really just kind of talking about what's the overall amount of money in the market. And what we can see here is we can see how much that jumped in 2020. When you hear the phrase, Anthony and I or other people say, oh, they were just printing money. They were printing money.
We do say that.
Well, this is what it was. They were legit, actually just not printing money. They weren't making more dollar bills, but digital
they did
on the computer screen.
Trillions of dollars into the money supply. And it hasn't come down. This is the real problem is instead of restricting the flow of money, we basically are just trying to let it ride out at a new level.
Yeah.
Which means inflation, right? So,
and the Fed has been trying to pull some of it out, but at a much smaller rate. And that's where we can see in that upper graph actually on both graphs, that dip, that's where they really started trying to pull money out during the really the highest parts of inflation. And when we were hitting those 8-9%, they were pulling money out by not renewing their purchases of mortgage-backed securities and other bond instruments, which is also what helped give us such low rates, is they were dumping all that money in, and they were really juicing those markets.
All right, next one. Let's talk about, the impact of the new administration. Now, this is largely speculation, and a lot of what Tucker and I hear is not to talk politics with you, but when one branch, either the Democrats or the Republicans control everything, they tend to make decisions that favor them, right? So they tend to spend more money. It's less balanced in so many ways. So I think one of the things you can for sure take away as the red sweep is the Republicans are going to push their own agendas, right? And so we know that. What we don't know, and we have no clue, is what is that actually going to mean over the next year, right? Mm-hmm. Do we know about tariffs? We don't, right? We talk a lot about it. We don't know much about how that's going to affect housing policy, although they put a pretty pro-housing person kind of in that office. Also, their focus on deregulation is, pro-business in so many ways. So they probably will reach back to that executive order that Clinton had put into office a long time ago. And it's really just going to say, what are the effective, what are essential government services, right? And that was the last time we had a much more balanced budget from the federal perspective. Yeah. So there's a lot of things happening here. What I can tell you is that they all have an impact and we have no idea what's actually going to stick. So basically just keep going with the way we are going right now. And that's probably best expectations.
There is one thing I do really want to hit on, and this is the second item here, and this is number 2. This is the release of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac from conservatorship by the U.S. government. So they, at one point, they had always been, with under the government's kind of purview and overwatch and regulations to make sure everything acted normal. Early 2000s got released from that. Then we had the housing crisis of really bad loans, bad lending policy, and the U.S. government was also on the hook of that because they are government-backed loans. They said, oh, no, we're putting this back under conservatorship. We want to make this run well. Well, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have both been very profitable. Now there's talk of releasing them, turning them into private entities with still government-backed funding. So that's going to be a really interesting piece.
Huge one to affect
and that could really affect our pricing on loans and the availability of conventional loans. So it's just something to keep an eye on. If this really does move forward, keep a really close eye on this because this will impact us drastically depending on which way it swings. It could be awesome. Hey, we have a lot more liquidity, a lot more lending, or it could be more of a constraining of, hey, these loans aren't as good. We're giving loans to folks who aren't as well qualified, and now we have foreclosures and defaults, which then
I think the
hurt
markets
whole
are
system.
probably thinking this is a positive thing for the mortgage industry,
Mhm.
but it really is yet to be told, even if this is going to happen in the next 4 years, right? Like,
There's
even
a
if
lot
they
to go
pass
into that.
something, these are giants, right? They're behemoths in the market. So, yeah, there's lots to talk
Yeah,
about here,
they
but
are
there's
the
actually
markets. They are
nothing
the
that is going to
market.
affect us this year, right?
Yeah.
Very little could even affect us in the upcoming year. Okay, so can the federal deficit be cut? I think this is one that, wanted to look at just a little bit. This one, yeah, I guess the federal government is going to cut some things, but in all reality, what do we really see here? We see that there's just too much spending taking place from Congress. And unless they reel that in, it's not about like there's too many government workers or these are inefficient organizations. We're talking about billions of dollars in this graph, not trillions of dollars being overspent. So I guess that's what it is.
And the way to think of it is, we all know, hey, if I make 100,000 and I spend 120,
That's right.
and I do that for a long time, I'm going to have some major issues. Now, the federal government has a little bit better credit than I do.
Yeah,
So
but
they
either
can-
way,
they
it's
can keep-
exactly the
well,
same
They
scenario.
can keep borrowing, so they can keep building it longer and longer. Whereas if it was you or I and we're at 120%, debt to income, that doesn't look good, right? No one's giving us a loan. We're not making payments. We're living off of credit cards, barely and minimum payments.
Yeah.
We're not there as the government,
But the
we're
government's not
trending that
borrowing
way.
at 30%. That's the difference between you, the consumer,
Yeah,
and the government.
but
Is the government's borrowing.
But
at
bond
30%.
rates keep going up. So as
Right,
the
so they're
bond rates keep going up, that means the cost for our government to go get new loans keeps getting more and more and more and more expensive every time. All right, so this is
On
one.
that note, Tucker, what about this?
This is from one of my favorite little blog economists, Elliot Eisenberg. Highly recommend him. Look him up. He does a ton of real estate stuff. Great speaker as well. Rate reversal. So I'll read this out real quick. If you think it odd that the Fed has cut rates by 100 bips, right, 1% over the last 3 months, yet the 10-year Treasury rates are rising, you would be correct, right? That is really odd. That shouldn't be doing it. The Fed has cut rates 7 times since 1989, including the recent cuts. 4 times rates noticeably fell. Twice they rose trivially, and this time the 10-year Treasury rates are up more than 75 basis points. So that means 0.75%. Moreover, markets fear 2025 threaten more of the same. What does that mean?
Well, all that really means is that the markets think that things are going to get worse instead of better, so they're hedging their bets.
That's right.
And so what's happening that has never happened before is that pessimism in the markets is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
I think that's what this is telling us in so many ways.
And it's really, this is why when you feel it out there going, wait, the Fed rate dropped, why are mortgage rates not dropping? And they're going the other direction. Well, and that's because of a lot of fear right now around where the markets are going and the U.S. debt and where bond rates are going to be going in the future, which is up.
That's right. Okay, so the number one most important factor in, all of our decisions around interest rates really comes down to employment rate. The one thing that gets me on employment rate, because employment rate is at a pretty good level right now, right? Nationally, things are sitting right where you can see them right here, 4.whatever% they are. But Colorado and Boulder County are the other 2 lines on there, are now converging with the nation. Right. And Colorado has a history of doing way better than the nation, other than where you saw it after the .com boom or bust. And then when you saw it after the Great Recession, Colorado was a little slower to pick up, but like Boulder really was unaffected in so many ways. And so you're really seeing higher paying jobs become part of the unemployment factor. And I think that's something that over the period of time that we really have to locally watch is like, what kind of jobs are we creating versus what kind of jobs are we losing? And that's one of my biggest concerns, right? My biggest concerns are that we didn't handle inflation well enough, and we are now losing jobs that are higher paying and sacrificing them for lower paying jobs. So,
yep. And that's, this is a little bit of a side note, but a lot of the tech, life science, a lot of those really hot industries that were just driving the market in 2021 and 22, they're very dependent on cheap and ample amounts of debt and liquidity. That all dried up. That got more expensive. What's the first thing you do? What's the most expensive part of a company? Normally your people. And that's where we can see that unemployment of the higher end jobs eroding a little bit. But we also have new entities coming in. So it's always this kind of turn here, especially Boulder County locally, because we're so well educated. But it's what jobs are we losing and what jobs are replacing it?
Exactly. All right. So what about engaging employment?
Oh, you want me to read out loud again?
Yeah, I'd love you to read out loud.
Yeah, because you don't want to either.
No one wants to read this.
Everyone loves reading out loud.
Elliot Eisenberg is one of our favorites, so follow him.
So good. Okay, engaging employment. So this was towards the end of December. This was sent out. Actually, no, 113. Net December employment grew. Net December employment growth blew past expectations with the rise of 256,000 jobs. That's a lot. The largest rise since 3/24, so since March 2024.
Right.
Moreover, the unemployment rate declined to 4.1%. This October-November revisions were insignificant. Remember, during the summer, we had major revisions of like
every month. It was crazy.
100,000 plus. That's really hard to judge as a market. This is evidence that the labor market has tightened and may be gaining steam. With the Trump administration about to take the reins and concerns about tariffs and such on top of mind, near-term rate cuts are on hold. So this is really saying, hey, the Fed's not going to be making any cuts for a good amount of time, probably maybe even until June, July, midsummer, because they're waiting to see the policy coming through. Because if policy comes in that will be inflationary,
right,
they don't want to cut and then have to raise rates. They'd rather sit, be patient, and then if it's good policy, they'll lower rates.
Well, I think the thing you got to think about, too, is when you're looking at something like this, the Fed, what they're doing takes 12 to 18 months to actually affect anything. So they can't see immediate results. So it's not like they just have a yo-yo. I mean, they literally have to make bets way down the road, and they're trying to have the most forethought. So when you watch what the Fed is doing, it's a good idea to kind of gauge, what's their confidence in the economy in so many ways. All right, so let's look at per capita income. This one's interesting because you can really see nation and then the state outperforming that, and then Boulder County at the top. This one really tells us a lot about what to expect. But the one reason we kind of put this in here is, yes, it's rising, and it's been rising pretty fast. We still outperform. The housing affordability crisis is largely due to the fact that our housing has risen so much faster than our income rates. So this is a slide from NAR. You can see, 4.15 million homes sold in the last year. That's up 6% year over year, which is great. But inventory is still kind of flirting at certain levels. But look at the median sales price. It's up almost 5%. So unless incomes rise by 5%, housing effectively gets more expensive, right? And that's not what's necessarily happening anywhere.
No,
really.
No, we're not seeing 5% wage increases.
Yeah.
During COVID, we actually had great wage increase because of the worker shortage and available workers. But that's kind of eroded. We're getting back to a little bit more of a balanced.
Yeah, it feels a little bit more normalized right now, right?
I don't know if it's fair or not, but it's more balanced.
Definitely
to what it was historically.
Fair.
There's no fairness in this. It's just saying what was the historical norms.
Okay, so look at this one. This is housing affordability. That's the blue line, and you can see average and median home prices and how that's been affected over the last while. Normally, that blue line, we really like to see it trending kind of in line with the median home prices, because median employment, median home prices, right? That would be where you would be looking at this. That affordability index is really important. It stays there. Ever since the pandemic, we've seen those home prices finally stabilize a little bit, and the actual home pricing index is still rising. So it's just less and less affordable to buy housing than it has been before. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is due to the cost of money right now, but it also is just the fact that housing continues to rise as employment does not.
Yep. So your housing is outpacing your employment.
Exactly.
So my house will, the cost to go buy a new house will raise more this year than I'll get paid this year.
That's right.
So my raise will not be as much as my, relatively speaking.
Right, relatively speaking across the nation, right? So you can see the median here in the red, that was that line, but that's number 6 right there, that would be existing home sales. So that's like month supply of inventory, basically. There's a lot of inventory out there on the market, but you're seeing that 4 million mark. We're just not selling as many homes as we have all the way back to basically 2010, 2011. Yeah. So we're just at a low rate, which means first-time home buyers don't really exist right now, or at least a lot less than they usually do.
And the median age has also jumped a lot for that first-time
from like 34 to 38 is where the stats are right now. It's pretty pretty insane.
So this,
what about this one, Tucker?
This
You
is
like
one
this
of the, this is, you know, this is as close as you'll get to a crystal ball. And I almost feel like we don't put this at the beginning, otherwise everyone would just tune out right away. But this is a scatter plot of all of the Fed, of the entire Fed board and their predictions of where long-term rates will be by the end of each year. So you can see for 2024, yep, that lined up right where we ended up. For 2025, the consensus is just about around 4 to 4.25. And then for looking at 26, by the end of 26, they're hoping to be around 3 to 3.25. Now you can really see where the hawks and doves are. Of the hawks being on the higher side, there's a couple of outliers there. And then same on the other side of the couple of the doves going, wow, we really think rates will be a lot lower by the end of next year. No one really knows, but these are the people making the decisions. So this is as close as we'll get. And they are very numbers driven and data driven. So it's not necessarily, hey, I want to be right, so I'm going to vote and, you know, make the changes to make myself right. They follow the data. So when data comes out, they update their projections and their decisions.
They do.
But this is as close as you're going to get.
All right, so here's where we kind of make our break into housing more so. This is existing rates, kind of where they've been sitting. I think this week, I probably have another slide for you here, but you can kind of see where they were a couple weeks back. At 6.92 is like the existing 30-year fixed rate. Today we're at like 7.07, I think, but it actually was higher than that earlier in the week, and it's come down a little bit in expectations of basically the Fed sitting still on rates. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting right around 7% still. It really shouldn't be anything to panic about. You can see this is more historical view on rates. The one thing that you can see here is when you really take a historical look at interest rates, money is still cheaper than it was in most people's lifetimes that are alive right now. So other than people that are Tucker and I's age where our professional career has been really cheap money the entire time, most people will eventually get right back into, our economy functioned at 7% rates or 6% rates just fine for a very long time. People have to get back to that mindset because it really will take a long time at a higher rate for us to really,
And I mean, if you look at the upper graph, really since the dot-com bubble and, right around 2000, 2001, we haven't really ever been below 6 or 6.5%, 7%.
We really
So that just shows how cheap the money's been the last 25 years or 20 years or so.
Right.
And that's where a lot of this historical, some of those objections, wait for rates to come down. Well, if you look at it historically, are we going to be kind of in this higher rate environment for a little bit longer? We don't know, but it's just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. And, I know we've all used this phrase, hey, marry the house, date the rate. Going forward, I'd be a little bit more careful about that. And that's purely just because we don't know. We were really confident 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, rates were going to drop. They haven't, and now that we have changes in policy coming up too, there's just a lot of uncertainty. So I'd be careful on over-promising rates are going to drop down the road because you don't want to have people come back and saying, hey, you said this.
That's right.
No one likes, no good deed goes unpunished.
A lot of interest rate slides there for you, but pick your favorite, I guess, if you're using them. This is the U.S. supply of housing, so you can see kind of where that's at. Existing inventory on the market, 1.3 million, basically 4 months of inventory. This is what I would consider a balanced market nationally. That is a good place to compare to what we have locally, right? So locally, we have way less inventory than that because a lot came off the market in December. But I do think that this is a good bearing on what should we expect going forward? Because it's very cyclical, but you can see we're in a rising inventory environment and have been since 22. That probably is going to happen again this year, right? Mm-hmm. Because it just tends to repeat itself until factors change. And until interest rates come down, we're going to be in this rising inventory environment because housing affordability is so low. Now, you can see it here. Look at this. This is new homes, not existing homes. So you can also see that as builders are making decisions, this is going to start really affecting builder decisions because when they have 8 months of inventory on the market or 9 months of inventory like they do today, they just aren't going to build more lots as much, right?
So that means they're not going to be bringing in new housing to help solve our housing shortage because and this is more Colorado specific, but that cost to build is so high that you're not really building that missing middle or even that lower income unless you're getting tax credits.
It's true. So that's why we build so many apartments here.
Yeah, right? And so that's why they're apartments for rent, not for sale.
Yeah, they're not condos. They're apartments,
and they're not meant to be sold because of the condo defect law. So then we go, wow, we just are continuing to not build places for people to buy, and we're going to continue to see that trend. And I also say, look at the crane survey, right? Remember 3 years ago? Anywhere you went, you saw cranes everywhere across Boulder. You saw cranes all across Denver. How many cranes do you see now? And that just is an idea of what new developments are coming through. We don't really have a lot of new stuff coming out in Boulder County, let alone the Front Range, for new home sales, because these builders are still hitting 8-9 months of inventory. That means it's taken ages to sell that existing product that they have a lot of debt against.
Yeah, and I really think this is going to be a continuing problem. I started a podcast like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. And the whole premise and the reason we got it going is there's this huge housing shortage. How do we solve the housing shortage? And then here we are, where like, I'm just going to like toot my own horn again and be like, okay, now what are we doing about the housing shortage in Colorado? Because we're just not building enough for population growth.
Let me help you out with some. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's fair. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, someone has to do that for you.
Thanks, buddy. This is supply of inventory. This is the U.S. in the blue line, Colorado in the red line, green line is Boulder. You can see that, Colorado has been outpacing the active supply of inventory in many ways. Right now, it's a little bit lower month supply, but like you can see what we're looking at here. There's a lot of units on the market, and ours is continuing to rise faster because our housing is more expensive, right? It's pretty simple. You can see the new listings coming to market though. Check this out. The home buying season in Colorado is just slightly shorter than in the nation, and it's largely due to our seasonality of the market, right? Like if you look in some of the mountain markets, it might be half of what we have. So you can see people just don't list a lot for like 3 months of the year. And then you see that they list a lot more from March to October. So very interesting to kind of look at that when you compare them. Look at demand.
And then demand though. And that's where we can see when listings come to market is a much narrower window, right? It's more of a peak. Whereas when we look at, especially here in Colorado, even over the last couple of years, and even looking back to COVID years, it's much broader. So the demand is a little bit more of like a rounded mountain, whereas your listings are more of a peak, right? It's a lot more drastic. Yep. And that just shows that the buyer demand really kind of stabilizes, and buyers are out shopping before your listings are on the market.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is too, buyer season and seller season don't always line up. Mm-mm. So if you're going to work with buyers, you need to work with buyers when it makes sense for those buyers to buy houses. Now, if they're well qualified and they can compete, they literally can shop whenever they want. And if sellers are trying to get an edge on the market, they just need to come to market earlier in the year because there are buyers active and not enough sellers out there on the market. And then towards the end of the year, it's going to be the inverse where lots of inventory, not as many buyers because the buyers, eventually either taper off or, holidays are not as much fun to move during. So they just don't, right? So you see that.
And like the weather we've had, I don't want to move in 5-degree weather.
Yeah, who wants to move in 5-degree weather?
At least I want to be hot.
That's true. Median days in MLS across the country are around 70, 71. Gauge that against what you're seeing here. Locally, we're about 10 days less than that in most markets. But in all reality, you can really see that it takes a lot of time for that to happen. We're not even close to where we used to be. 2017 was higher than where we are today. So I just want to remind you that this is not a fast or slow market. We are getting back to more normalized kind of market conditions in so many ways.
And this is a big one here is our median listing price per square foot is really a good measure to tell based on the square footage, how expensive is it and how much is the property going up, down, and where are we at compared to the rest of the nation. Right there, you can see on the top, Colorado is that red line. Right above that is Boulder County, which is the green line. We can see how extreme our difference is even versus the rest of the state in our price per square foot for existing inventory.
I still can't believe that the U.S. average is basically $220. I mean, I don't even think you could build the product for $220 in Colorado, let alone the dirt.
Oh, no.
It's crazy.
No, you can build the cheapest thing possible for $220 per square foot.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? Hey, it's more cost effective to go buy old product than new product.
True.
Is that, but you're also buying old product, old houses, which have issues. So, it's just going into that. But really this price per square foot is something to track so we can kind of see the apples to apples based on the square footage. And I think that's just a nice way to kind of track it. And you can really see during COVID how much we spiked, especially in Boulder County on that top green line.
We really
that
did.
Little peak right there. I mean, we got up to almost $460 per square foot, $480 per square foot for the median. I mean, that's everything from Lyons, Longmont to Superior to Lafayette to Boulder. condos, detached, and it just shows how expensive, and that's where the difference is our incomes aren't matching the cost per square foot increase.
Yep. All right. So median days on market, I already discussed this one, so I'm going to move on. This is kind of the year-over-year change, though, for median days on market. This is all Boulder County, so it kind of gives you an idea of just how things have shifted, right? So take a look at that. You can kind of see that black line being our baseline, right? The one thing that it was really important for us to kind of touch on is showing time traffic, because this represents the vast majority of showings that take place in the market. You can see that the U.S. has finally started to slow down. We've been looking at this every month. And, the Western region, this is everything out west, right? All the way from California to Colorado to whatever. And basically, we're seeing the slowdown, but we've seen the slowdown for 3 straight years. We had such huge increases in prices during the pandemic that region has lagged behind. But if you remember looking at the graphs, that was the region that led the acceleration. So now the Northeast, who had the least amount of appreciation, is having the most showing traffic. So this kind of is the ebb and flow, but it is substantially slower than it has been for a decade. Mm-hmm. Now, you can see here that in the last year compared to 2023, we did really see increase in buyer behavior for most of the year. I mean, really even from like June, July on, a little bit more buyer behavior, right? And then rates dipped a little bit in the September time period, and we did see continued, plateauing showings, right? Yeah. And that's a really good sign, because that showed the health in the market, the buyers were coming back to the market. And
it's also showing how, in economics, we use this term elastic. Is it a bendy rubber band, or is it a brittle one where it's inelastic and it's going to break? So when rates dropped, within 2 weeks, we saw 10% more houses under contract, which was a huge jump.
Immediately.
Yeah. And that was because when rates dropped, it was less than 2 weeks before things started going under contract at a much higher pace. And that just shows how elastic the market is. So I know while we're all waiting for rates, when there is a window of rates dropping, buyers are ready, or buyers are interested, and activity picks up. So keep that in mind, is if we do get good mortgage data coming out that says, hey, rates dropped a quarter point in the last 2 weeks, boom, get your people out, remind your folks.
Right? We don't have to move mountains here.
Yeah.
A quarter point can make the difference for some buyers to be able to jump in and actually buy homes. So quarter to a half a point changes, they're going to happen throughout the year, right? Interest rates never stay steady. They always are going up or down in one direction or the other. So when that happens, you just need to be ready. And if you've got those buyers that are just on the cusp that close,
keep them engaged.
Yeah, keep them engaged.
Keep them engaged, because when rates do drop,
week to week,
or even, almost day to day sometimes right now.
For real.
But when we have a week or two of lower rates, hey, keep those folks engaged, because those are the perfect buyers to go buy now if they can afford it. Hey, they're not stretching and killing their budget. So let's talk a little bit more on the housing price index. And this is a really fun one to look at. Anthony, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so there's I've got 4 of these in a row to look at. So we've got quarterly, yearly, 5-year, and since 1991 when they started doing this metric. And you can see appreciation by state and where it took place. So above the nation, the top 20%, those are all the dark ones in the last quarter. Like I said, the Northeast, places like Montana are still doing really well, Idaho, a couple of places in the South, also places that saw low appreciation over the pandemic. Then in the last year, you can really see, some of these places have really performed for a year now, or Midwest really starting to show that. National average was 4% housing price increase. Inflation has been way above 4%. So housing affordability should be getting easier, right? Well, it is in some places and it isn't in others. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at it over the last 5 years, I guess this is 91. I've got these out of order. Here's the 5 years. You can see that most of the country was operating in that 50% range, right? 57% is our national average. But places like Montana and Idaho, people have really started to move to in the last 5 years. The South has seen much more increases. And of course, Maine, Vermont, that area. But 5 years, this kind of actually surprises most people, I think. Now, when you look at it since 91, the reason we've had so many, slowdown really in showing traffic out here is because it has gotten so much more expensive to live in the West.
Yeah.
Right? Florida and the West, right? You've got an aging population in the United States. They tend to like to move to warmer places like Florida, but it's not places like Florida. It's only Florida from what you can see on the map, right?
Arizona.
And Arizona. Yeah. But the rest of the West has really been much, much more expensive. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's slowing down, because when you look at every one of these quarters all the way back, Montana, Idaho, even some of the West is still doing remarkably well. It's not that housing's just going to slow down here. It's just that it was so much cheaper in the Northeast that people have moved back from that like Chicago to New York region, right? It's been just wild to watch.
I mean, and anecdotally, we've heard of people leaving the state for moving Midwest or moving back, to the East Coast.
Yeah.
Affordability, job opportunities, and cost of living.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that we're going to be continuing to battle for the future in Colorado. We will always have this battle right now with our cost of housing versus our income.
Totally. All right. So our last slide to talk with you about, we put this in here from Carr, just to kind of give you the Colorado update to kind of base this off of the national stuff. Really, what I think you want to look at here is what's going on with median sales prices, right? We've been talking a lot. We opened a new class. We just actually finished teaching it before we shot this video about the condo townhouse market and some of the challenges there versus the single family home market. Single family homes, they're just still getting more expensive. They're following that national trend, 5%, 4.7%. Those under contract numbers over the last year-over-year data, those are looking great, right? There's more buyers active ever since rates started to dip down a little bit. But the problem is that's being coupled with more listings coming to market. So it is still just advantageous for your buyers and sellers to operate on what they know today, to get out in the market and just get active. Because if you've got a condo or a townhouse to sell, you might just need to sell it. Doesn't matter what the market conditions look like. It's either a necessity or something else, right? And then same with detached single family. You just don't know that it's going to be easier. Yeah. I genuinely think that it's going to get more expensive as a home buyer to buy houses based off of your income. So what that means is you probably just need to get into the market. And if 7% your rate, 7% your rate now. So we're seeing it in Colorado just like we are the nation. I think that we're all in for another year. 2025 is going to be one of these years where we're kind of working through some things, but we probably will see a little bit of an elevated amount of total sales.
And I mean, it does feel like that anecdotally already. I think people woke up on the first and said, "Hey, I'm buying a house this year."
It always felt like that last year, but then we kind of ran out of steam there.
Yeah. Well, and I think we had too many big other factors going on, and we may have the same factors this year. But I think, folks, if you have to move, you have to move, right? Life can only be put on hold so long, and that's kind of what we're seeing and hearing. And I really think that, really across the front range, your single family detached, if you're looking at a long-term buy that's going to be helpful for you and your family.
Just a gold standard for wealth.
You can't go down. You can't go wrong with the single family if you buy it right. Because they can't build them for the existing product at the cost per square foot. They can't build them that way. Now, of course, it won't be as brand new and nice with all the bells and whistles, but overall, for the affordability factor, that's going to be something that we continue to see is the single-family detached house, especially in Boulder County, is always going to be the gold standard because we really are not building that many more of them. There's a few coming in here or there, specs and one-off developments, 15 houses, 20 houses. We're not seeing a 300-house subdivision pop up in every one of our, cities or submarkets. We don't have 10,000 new houses hitting Boulder County in the next 4 years. We don't. What we do have is a lot more rentals, a lot more affordable rentals, and then a lot more of the high-end lock and leave, higher density luxury products, especially here in Boulder. But that's what we're going to be seeing in Denver too. So that's where we're kind of seeing this diverging, and that's where the condo townhouse market's continuing to suffer a little bit because there's rentals out there that are cheaper than a mortgage that are nicer.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like if you've made it this long, I owe it to you to say we would love to work with you if we do not already at Land Title. Tucker and I are always here as resources for you, so hit us up, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. You gotta point up which side. Yeah. Like and subscribe over here. Yeah, right there. I'm not the YouTube guy. Sorry. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.